got one quick.
All right. Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today. As she said, my name is Charissa Hipp, and I'm joining you from Williamsport, Maryland, which is where the headquarters is located for the Cno Canal Trust. We actually are headquartered with the Cno Canal National Historical Park employees for the National Park Service. We are the official nonprofit partner of the Cno Canal National Historical Park. And I've only been with the Cno Canal Trust since April, so I'm a fairly new employee of theirs. But I am not new to the Cno Canal National Historical Park because I have lived 2 miles from the park for much of my life, and I am very well versed with the park. I actually started my career fresh out of college with the National Park Service at their Office of Communications at the Department of the Interior. So I'm very familiar with specifically the parks in this area. And I grew up in Washington County, Maryland. So Antietam National Battlefield and the Cno Canal National Historical Park were literally right in my backyard when I was growing up. So I know them well. When my mother, who was also a career National Park Service ranger, started her career, those 2 parks were actually combined. So Cno Canal and Antietam Battlefield were one park unit. And so that's where she started her career with the National Park Service. And she's now retired. She retired as the Civil War to Civil Rights Sesquicentennial Coordinator a few years back. So I guess you could say I get it honest from my mom. And now I have a son who is 20 years old. He is a junior at Frostburg State University studying wildlife and fisheries. And he just finished his 2nd summer at Antietam National Battlefield with Conservation Legacy. So hopefully we'll be passing on some of those interest and love for parks to him. And hopefully he'll continue on that family tradition. But certainly have a love for parks. I've worked in the tourism, mostly in the tourism industry. I left the Park Service because I was living here and commuting about 2.5 hours to the Department of Interior every day. So once I had my son, I did take a step away from the National Park Service to raise him and his brother. And then I had another daughter a little bit later in life. So I have worked mostly in the tourism industry in Washington and Frederick counties here in Maryland. And I've also worked with the Heart of the Civil War Heritage area. And then most recently, before coming to the Cno Canal Trust, I was with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. So you can probably see a pattern here. I love the outdoors. I love outdoor recreation. And I love getting visitors to come to these wonderful places that we have in our area. So I'm excited to talk to you today about the Cno Canal and the Cno Canal Trust and the work that we do here in the park. So Gary, were you able to bring up the slides? We can go ahead and get started with that. Thank you so much. All right, we can go ahead and advance to that next slide. All right, I wanted to share some of the beautiful images that I have actually taken along the Cno Canal. It is definitely a park for all seasons. This is a photo that encapsulates one of my favorite seasons on the canal, and that's springtime. These are some of the beautiful Virginia bluebells that we have that bloom here right in the Williamsport area, but we have them really up and down the canal and kind of those woodland forested areas along the towpath. And so it's, definitely a time when I love to get out either on my bike or do a lot of hiking on the towpath and enjoy those spring ephemerals that are in bloom. So spring is a beautiful time to get out on the canal. So we have a little bit of a wait to go until we get to see those spring ephemerals in bloom now that fall is upon us and we're having these chilly mornings here in September. All right, if you want to go to the next slide. And then this is in the more western part of the Cno Canal towpath, the Pawpaw Tunnel. And this was taken in February on a hike that I did on the Pawpaw Tunnel trail. And then the trail actually goes through the Green Ridge State Forest and then comes back down through the Pawpaw Tunnel. And it's beautiful the way that the ice and the water trickles down over the shale barrens up on that section of the trail near Allegheny County, Maryland. Okay, next slide, please. And then this is in Hancock, Maryland, a little bit further west of Williamsport, where I am now. This was taken in August. Some of the beautiful lilies out on the water and a section of the canal that is rewatered. Go ahead, next slide, please. And then this was taken down closer to you, closer to Great Falls. This was taken from Olmsted Island on a visit to hike Billy Goat Bee Trail. Next slide, please. And then, as I said, it is a trail for all seasons. Every once in a while, I like to get out there in the winter and bundle up and see if I can get out there early in the morning and go until I can't see any more footsteps or evidence of cross-country skiers, and really get out there and enjoy the wildlife. And just the quietness of a snowy morning on the canal. So this was taken here in Williamsport at my closest access point near Lock House 44. All right, next slide, please. All right, so going back to the history of the canal and how it all started, George Washington founded the Potomac Canal, or the Potomac Company, in the 1780s, and he wanted to build a canal, but his company was never really profitable. So the goal was to connect Western agricultural goods to Eastern markets in the Atlantic Ocean. And you also had the National Road being built around this time from 1811 to 1817, but it wasn't easy to move the goods by road because of the mountains at this time. So work began on the Cno Canal back in 1828. Next slide, please. So the Cno Canal Company operated from Cumberland to Georgetown from 1850 to 1924. And prior to the completion of the canal, the lower section primarily transported agricultural goods. Now, during the peak operating years of the canal, which was during the 1870s, the canal primarily transported coal from the coal mines of West Virginia and Western Maryland, as well as Western Pennsylvania. In 1890, after the 1889 flood, the Cno Canal Company went bankrupt. Now, of course, you'll hear this competition between the B&O Railroad and the Cno Canal. Now, the B&O Railroad petitioned to become receivers of business since they held preferred mortgages on canal property. And the B&O held canal in receivership until 1938, when the canal was sold to the federal government after 1924 and 1936 floods. Next slide, please. So coal was huge on the canal. Shipments between 797,000 and 950,000 tons per year during the canal's most profitable years. So coal was the primary energy source for industry and travel. And it wasn't until the later 19th century that railroad technology was able to compete with the canal in the ability to haul this heavy freight. So there was a lot of coal that was going up and down the canal on these canal boats being hauled from the western ports to Georgetown. Next slide, please. Many informal basins and wharves line the canal to ship agricultural and and building products as well: wheat, flour, corn, hay, potatoes, and timber. And then stores and warehouses owned by lock tenders and farmers along the canal contracted to ship their goods to markets in Georgetown. Next slide, please. So you often had families living and working on these canal boats, and everybody on the canal boat had a job. Children as young as 6 years old learned to drive the mules, and large families could often run 2 boats in later years on the canal. Some of the families did have homes for the off season, and in the early years, there were African American captains and crews on the canal. All right, next slide, please. Lock tenders, who tended the locks along the canal, raising and lowering the boats, had to work pretty much 24/7 and be available whenever boats were coming through those locks. And they had to be available all hours of the day and night. If they were leaving their property for some reason, oftentimes their wives or children had to be available to operate the locks for them. Their average salary was between $150 to $400, depending on how many locks were tended. And the women could be lock keepers if they were the widow of the previous lock keeper, or like I said, oftentimes they were trained and knew what to do if their husband were to step away or to go to town to get something, go to the store to get something, but someone had to remain there at the lock house to tend the lock at all times. Next slide, please. Throughout the Civil War, the canal was the border between the Union and the Confederacy, so it was used by both Federal and Confederate armies for transportation. There was also a lot of damage to the canal and the boats that used it throughout the Civil War. Towns along the canal were subjected to raids, bombardments, and occupations. And especially up in this area, you'll see a lot of history tied to particularly the Maryland Campaign of 1862. You have the area around Harper's Ferry, and then certainly here around Williamsport, where I am, this area was heavily involved in the retreat from Gettysburg in 1863. So, next slide, please. Mother Nature was not always kind. And so certainly, since we were talking about Mother Nature before this got started today, flooding was something that often plagued the canal from the early years of construction throughout its operation. And major floods caused severe damage to the canal in June of 1836, September of 1843, 1847, 1852, 1877, 1889, 1894, 1924, and then the last that closed the canal permanently was in March of 1936. Floods and competition with the B&O Railroad put the canal completely out of business in 1924. Next slide, please. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas. So in 1954, commercial development threatened the canal and the towpath, and there was talk about turning it into a parkway. But William O. Douglas really saw the value in making this a space for people to go and enjoy nature and get out and be able to recreate. And so he challenged editors of the Washington Post to hike the entire 184.5-mile towpath with him to really get out and see the benefit in keeping this a natural space. And his plan really worked in getting them to champion his cause and really see his side, that this could be a wonderful natural space if it was preserved as such. Next slide, please. So in 1971, this Cno Canal did become a national historical park. Next slide, please. And here is the back of the brochure with the map on. It gives you a little bit of an idea of our linear park and our 184.5 miles that stretch from Cumberland to Georgetown, and some of those towns in between, like the Pawpaw Tunnel and Hancock that I've mentioned. You'll see Williamsport there, kind of near the middle. You have Sharpsburg and Shepherdstown, Harper's Ferry, where we actually do have a few miles that overlap with the Appalachian Trail, and then Brunswick, and then Great Falls, not too far from Georgetown. Next slide, please. So the park preserves some pretty unique attributes. There are about 20,000 acres within the Cno Canal National Historical Park today. And there is some pretty unusual geologic and natural diversity preserved within the park. With all of those lock houses particularly that we have, there are actually over 1,300 historic structures within the park. And there are a lot of engineering marvels like the Pawpaw Tunnel, bridges, locks. And few people know that the park actually ranks among the most biodiverse national parks, because you have very different habitat at the Potomac Gorge area at Great Falls than you do once you get to Western Maryland and the shale barrens of, say, Washington and Allegheny County, Maryland. And you have a lot of different kind of lowland forested and floodplain forested areas in between there. So you have a lot of different changing habitats, and actually 4 physiographic provinces that you go through. There are 1,500 different plants within the park. 200 of those have been classified as rare, threatened, and endangered species. And then we actually have 347 miles of trails, in addition to places for people to go rock climbing, lots of fishing opportunities and paddling opportunities as well. So there are many different opportunities for outdoor recreation within the park. Next slide, please. The Cno Canal Trust was founded in 2007 as the official nonprofit partner of the Cno Canal National Historical Park. We are one of many different partners within the park, but we are the official nonprofit partner of the park. And we work in partnership with the National Park Service, very much hand in glove with them, and local communities to raise funds to preserve the park for future generations and to broaden support through programs that highlight the park's historical, natural, and cultural heritage and recreational opportunities. We work in partnership with the park to raise critical funds and resources to support maintenance and visitor programs in the park. Next slide, please. Our fundraising is currently focused on 4 initiatives within the park, and those are Towpath Forever, Towpath Resurfacing, Canal Classrooms, and the Rare, Threatened, and Endangered Plants program within the park. Next slide, please. Towpath Forever is a stewardship initiative that engages the public in philanthropic, volunteer, and advocacy support to ensure the park and its resources are here forever. So oftentimes when we have flood damage, there are culverts that get washed out or sections of the canal that get washed out, and there's money that's needed to repair sections of the canal. So we work to make sure that areas like that are, fixed so that there aren't these sections of the canal that people can't continue on. And so there aren't these huge detours and sections that are holes in, that 184.5-mile stretch of the canal. So we want to see this continuation of this pathway from Georgetown to Cumberland. Next slide, please. Back in 2016, an engineering study identified that there were about 80 miles of the towpath that were urgently in need of rehabilitation. Between tree roots and grassy median strips, rocks and other obstacles, the towpath just really needed a lot of TLC. And so the Great Allegheny Passage, which if you get on the canal at Cumberland, you can actually continue north on the Great Allegheny Passage to Pittsburgh. And so they have a surface on the Great Allegheny Passage that is crushed stone dust. And so some engineers came in, and after they did the engineering study, they suggested that this crushed stone dust was a better surface, and that on the Great Allegheny Passage, they have much better runoff, that surface material actually facilitates better water runoff when there are heavy rains. And so this program to resurface the towpath in the areas where it was needed began, and the trust started spearheading advocacy to get TAP funding so that we could put the same sort of crushed stone dust down and regrade these areas and go in and remove, or so that the park could work to, remove the tree roots and then those grassy medians, and then go in and put down this better material so that it would be safer for particularly our cyclists, but really anyone who is recreating on the towpath. And so it's been an ongoing several-year commitment to resurface the towpath, but to date, about 67 miles of the towpath have been resurfaced from around Violet's Lock to, it's working its way to Old Town right now. So we still have a ways to go to reach that full 80 miles, but we're getting there. We're definitely making progress. Next slide, please. Canal Classrooms. So this is a wonderful way for us to reach our youth and create future stewards for the Cno Canal. We bring thousands of students to the park each year, or at least we did pre-COVID. We're hoping that this is the year we can get fourth graders in the area back into the park. During COVID, things changed quite a bit and we weren't seeing as many field trips in the park. So we had to reimagine things a little bit. And so we were actually putting backpacks together with information and sending those backpacks out to the schools to try to get the information to the students. But we're keeping our fingers crossed that this is the year that we can hopefully get the students back out physically into the parks, because this summer we were able to get students with the Boys and Girls Clubs and Girls Incorporated locally back out into the park. So hopefully this is the school year for us as well. But generally speaking, we bring students into the park and we have STEAM lesson plans, which are science, technology, engineering, arts, and math curricula based lesson plans, where we teach them about all of the different attributes of the park and try to get them interested so that hopefully they will be the future caretakers of the park. And we deliver that information to them through a Canal Classroom core group of retired teachers that both our staff and also the education and interpretation staff have worked with to train. And it's just a wonderful group of volunteers that we have. Many of them are teachers who, when they were working for the local school systems, brought their students to the park. And now that they're retired, they love to continue to be a part of what we do at the park and also continue to work with the students. So it's just really a win-win for all of us that they can still continue to do what they love and that they still have that connection with us at the park and that they're volunteering with us. So it's a wonderful, that Canal Classroom core is a great group of retired teachers that we have who do outreach with our students who come to the park. And so we're very, very fortunate to have them. So our no, you can go ahead to the next slide, Gary. Thank you. So our Rare, Threatened, and Endangered Plants initiative is our newest initiative in the park. And it's something that's very different because most people think of either the history side of things when they think of the canal or they think of recreation. But most people don't understand that the canal is such a biodiverse habitat. And our natural resources staff, is somewhat thin and doesn't have as many rangers as they would like to have out in the field all of the time. But basically what they found is that when they were sending people out to monitor and inventory plants in the park is that there were all of these rare, threatened, and endangered plants. And when they were inventorying them, they found that not only do they have an incredible amount of rare, threatened, and endangered plants, but when they would do an inventory one year and refer to the last inventory that had been done several years ago, they would find that plants were disappearing that had been rare, threatened, and endangered plants that had been previously found in the park. So between 2008 and 2021, just over 100 previously identified rare, threatened, and endangered species were found along the Cno Canal. That meant about 95 were no longer found in the park. And so they found that they needed to be monitoring this on a more regular basis and that they wanted to be protecting those rare, threatened, and endangered plants that existed. They've found that a lot of the invasive plants are taking out a lot of these rare, threatened, endangered plants, that surging visitation and people trampling, not necessarily staying on trail, and things like that are really taking a toll on some of these fragile habitats. Things like climate change can also be contributing to this. And so the National Park Service has really created this long-term strategy to do more comprehensive identification and monitoring, but they have also, with the help of the trust, been able to hire a botany intern to go in and actually collect seeds from plants. And we have been, the park has been working with Mount Cuba Center in Delaware to actually collect seeds and then propagate them at Mount Cuba Center so that for some of these rare plants, they can place them back in the park and try to cultivate and keep these plant species going. So it's a really unique program. And the photograph that I put here on this slide is actually snow trillium. It is, snow trillium is only found in Maryland in the Cno Canal National Historical Park. And it's actually how the relationship with Mount Cuba Center got started. So we kind of consider it our poster child plant, if you will, because Mount Cuba Center in Delaware has a very extensive collection of Trillium, and they had reached out to Maryland DNR to try to get a sample of snow Trillium in Maryland. And so Maryland DNR connected Mount Cuba Center with the Cno Canal, and it started this wonderful relationship with them because the Cno Canal, in wanting to collect and propagate seeds somewhere for the Rare, Threatened, and Endangered Plants program, was kind of missing a place to do that. And so it started this great relationship with them. And so now Mount Cuba Center is where some of these rare, threatened, and endangered plants the seeds are being propagated. And we're lucky to be able to use the greenhouses at Mount Cuba Center. And it's just started this wonderful relationship with them. So that's a wonderful example of just how relationships in the conservation world can spring up. And so this is just a beautiful, I think, a beautiful example, because not all of our rare, threatened, and endangered plants are beautiful to the eye, but the snow Trillium is certainly a beauty. And so certainly, something that we want for future generations to be able to enjoy. And that one is one that I have not seen yet. It is supposedly here in Washington County, but I would certainly love to come across that one day in the park and be able to appreciate and enjoy that when I'm out hunting for spring ephemerals like the bluebells. Next slide, please. So we have a very unique program that operates between the Canal Trust and the Cno Canal National Historical Park, and that is the Canal Quarters program. We have worked with the park to restore 7 of the lock houses in the park. And after rehabilitating those lock houses, we have furnished them with period furnishings. And because the canal was operational for almost 100 years, we decided initially that some of the lock houses would be more rustic than others. So some of them do not have plumbing and do not have electricity, while others do. But they represent different periods while the canal was operational, and they are available for overnight stays for people who are either just traveling by car to the canal, or people who are, biking up and down the canal and want to spend the night and really kind of step back in time and experience what it was like to live along the Cno Canal. So that's a really fun, unique experience that we can offer to people who are coming to the park. And we hope to rehabilitate. We're keeping our fingers crossed. We have our eyes set on a specific lock house right now that we are hoping to rehabilitate in Frederick County, Maryland, as our next lock house. But it's a pretty big undertaking, especially with all of the historic structure reports and all of the steps that we have to go through with the National Park Service engineering studies and so forth that go along with that. But it's exciting to think of adding lock house number 8 to our list of canal quarters lock houses. So next slide, please. And then we work a lot with volunteers. So much of what we do in the park could not be done without so many of our volunteers. And throughout the year, I would say primarily in the spring, but we also have several scheduled for fall this year. We have what we call Canal Community Days. And it's generally a Saturday morning, sometimes a Saturday afternoon, where we have a specific area of the canal. Generally in the spring, we have a Great Falls Canal Community Days. We usually have one in Frederick County, and then we usually have one in Williamsport, where we have people sign up to do certain things, whether it is invasive species removal. It might be painting picnic tables, or trash removal, or something like sprucing up our picnic areas. So people come in for a few hours on a morning, and we say that they are, beautifying the park that morning, and everybody comes together, they come in, they get the work done, and it really just cleans up the park and makes it look really nice in that section. And we keep a running total then of how many pounds of trash get removed and how many pounds of invasive species are bagged out of there, because that is just an ongoing issue, especially things like garlic mustard. And there's multiple kinds of invasive species that just take over alongside the canal, that are easy enough to point out to really people of all ages. Some of them you need gloves and they can be thorny and difficult, but garlic mustard is one of those things you can teach 5-year-olds to even pull, and is easy enough to take a group in and get a lot out of there. But it's just a great community-based event, where we bring everyone together and get a lot of work done in a short amount of time. And so this fall, we had to reschedule our Frederick County one because all of our Frederick County events take place at boat ramps, and we had flooding last spring. So we're rescheduling that one for fall. And then we have one in Allegheny County around Cumberland this fall as well. And then we have a lot of corporate groups that come to us as well, that want to we have groups that come in and have like a day of service where they'll come to a certain section of the park, and depending on the size of the group, sometimes we'll have them at multiple sites, sometimes we'll have them more at one particular site, and we'll have certain projects lined up for them to do. I know KPMG is at I think at Fletcher's Cove today doing a project for us, and we've had them come in with much larger groups. I think they have a small group today, but we've had them come in with like 125 people at a time, and had to spread them out at like Carter Rock, Fletcher's Cove, and Great Falls, and do 3 projects in one day. So it's just wonderful that we have so many people that are willing to give back, because it is a trash-free park. People are asked to leave no trace and pack out what they pack in, but not everyone does that. And so there's always trash to be picked up, and people leave behind snack wrappers and water bottles and doggy do bags, and there's just a lot of stuff left behind. And so it's great, especially when families come out, and hopefully in showing young people how we should leave the park. Hopefully it's kind of ingrained in their heads that if everybody would leave the park this way, then we wouldn't have to have so many cleanups. Teaching them leave no trace is a huge part of stewardship, and just teaching them how to be good park users. So that's a lot of what we do as well. Next slide, please. And then Canal for All is the program that I referenced earlier in having our Boys and Girls Club groups in during the summer. So we provide opportunities for education, stewardship, and volunteerism that are safe, welcoming, and inclusive for all. And we actually provide opportunities, especially over the summer, is when we have a lot of our Canal for All programming, where we try to invite underrepresented or disadvantaged communities into the park and provide special programming for them so that they feel welcome and engaged, and that they know that it is their park too, and that they feel that they are, welcome. And we had so many, I think it was upwards of 330 students this summer with the local Boys and Girls Club. And that was primarily in Washington County, that they came to Williamsport and Four Locks on the Cno Canal. And we had them touring one of the lock houses. It's not one of the lock houses that you can spend the night in, but here in Williamsport, there is a refurbished lock house that the interpretive staff sometimes opens for tours. And so we were able to open that up and let them see how it's furnished, talk to them about the life of a lock keeper, and then we are able to actually unlock the lock at Lock House 44 and have them operate that lock. We ran them through a locking through skit so that they understand the engineering and the mechanics behind how the locks were operated. We did a little bit of foraging with them with berries on the canal. We did some short hikes with them and took them out and talked to them about Leave No Trace and Hiking 101, and talked to them about identifying trees and different things that they might see in nature when they're out on the canal, and just had a really, really good time with a lot of those students out on the canal this summer. So the Canal for All program is one of our newer programs. This is, it started during COVID, so this was the first summer that it was really fully on the ground, in-person operational. So it's really just getting going and getting its feet under it, and we're really taken off with it, and I think it's moving in a great direction, and I'm excited to see where that goes in the future. Next slide, please.
Hey, Charissa, we're about 8 minutes to 11, and we do have questions that have.
Okay. I have just a few.
Or get to the end and deal with them then.
Okay. All right. I have just a few more photos here. This particular photo is of the Great Falls Visitor Center. So it would be the visitor center on the canal closest to you. We do have several visitor centers, but this one is closest to you, and you'll see the Charles F. Mercer Canal Boat, which is operational, I believe, through October 15th of this year. So they do have canal boat rides on certain days of the week. Next slide, please. And then here's another photo. There's actually a kayaker here by the canal boat, but you can see people on the boat ride. Next slide, please. And then just another example, you never know what great wildlife you're going to see on the canal. We have a photo contest that we run through our Facebook page, and we had this wonderful photo submitted. I love how you have the great blue heron and then the deer peeking around at the corner of the frame there. So next slide, please. And then this is Lock House 10, just a kind of a great side porch image of that. So we always invite you to come and stay at one of our lock houses. Next slide, please. And then there's the Pawpaw Tunnel, which the easiest way to get to that is actually by going through Berkeley Spring, West Virginia. So that is up on the western portion of the canal, closer to Allegheny County. Next slide, please. And then this photo is taken close to me in Williamsport on the canal. So recreation, always a great place to take a walk, take a run, go for a bike ride. Next slide, please. And then there's nothing at all like a sunset or a sunrise on the canal. So this is a beautiful sunset image down near the Potomac Gorge, close to Great Falls. Next slide, please. All right, so how to plan your visit on the canal. So our website, which is canaltrust.org, is full of itineraries and park highlights by region along the canal, since it's such a long linear park. We also have a Cno Canal Mobile Explorer app, which is 99 cents, I believe. It's available for both Apple and Android, and it has over 600 points of interest on it. So that's another great trip planning tool should you ever wish to visit the Cno Canal. Next slide, please. And then kind of wrapping things up here, this is the 15th year for the Cno Canal Trust. So we have countless accomplishments that we are very proud of. Countless volunteers. As I said, we couldn't have accomplished half of what we have done over these years without nearly 12,000 volunteers and almost 55,000 volunteer hours. We have 59 canal stewards up and down the canal, which are all volunteers who help us do the work that we do. We have 10 canal towns who are generating economic development up and down the canal. And it is so funny, in our canal quarters, which is where you can spend the night in a lock house, we have had someone from every state except for South Dakota. So I guess we're looking for that diamond in the rough, that one person from South Dakota who has yet to come and stay. That's the only state we haven't had someone come and stay the night in our lock house. And then we have raised, countless dollars for Towpath Forever and Towpath resurfacing, and we have given $346,500 back to Canal Classrooms. So we're very, very excited, as I said, to have students back taking physical field trips this year. So next slide, please. So the canal, there's an estimated $259 million in deferred maintenance and repairs associated with the park's infrastructure inventory because of all of those buildings and culverts and bridges and things that exist along the canal. There's a lot of maintenance involved with that, and the park has an estimated $14 million in annual routine maintenance requirements as it is, and visitation continues to surge. So our role at the Canal Trust is really to mitigate the gap in funding through increased community support. Next slide, please. And visitation, as I said, visitation continues to surge. So in 2021, you'll see the Cno Canal down there at number 11. It was the 11th most visited national park with 5 million visitors. The numbers over on the right of recreation visits are rounded. So we're not tied with Zion. When you actually look at the numbers, we're just slightly behind Zion. So we are the 11th most visited national park, but still that's more than Yellowstone, Grand Canyon, and Rocky Mountain National Park. So that figure surprises a lot of people that we do have more visitors than those kind of signature national parks out west. Next slide, please. So thank you all for coming today to Coffee and Conversation and listening to my presentation. Next slide, please. And questions. I guess I have questions here to catch up with in the chat.
Yep. So the first one is a question about boat tours on the Cno Canal. So would somebody go to your website to find out when those are and how to arrange a ride?
Yes, the best thing to do would be to go to actually the Cno Canal website. So if you go to www.nps for National Park Service.gov/CHOH for Chesapeake and Ohio. That would be the canal's Park Service page. And then there's a column on there about plan your visit or something to that effect. And the boat tour information is on there. So they are planning on running the boat tours at Great Falls through October 15th, but it is something that runs according to staffing each day at Great Falls. And it is only on certain days of the week because of when they have the most rangers on staff. So that is where you can do the boat tours. when they do have full staffing, hopefully next year, there are also smaller boat rides that should be available at Williamsport. Those we're not running this year. Those are smaller motorized boats. They are not led by people or mules, but they hopefully in future years will be running. They have those boats at Williamsport, but they were not running this year. So they actually run in the basin, and it is the only place in North America where you can take a canal boat ride across the rewatered aqueduct. They repaired the Conacajig Aqueduct a few years ago, and so you can actually take those boat rides across the Conacajig Aqueduct. They turn around and come back to the Cushwa Basin, and then in the future they're supposed to go down and pass through Lock 44, but they need staffing to run those, and they've had a little bit of trouble with things growing in the water and wrapping around the rotors of those, so they've had some challenges with that.
The next question is the canal totally man-made, and what's the water source?
So there are only certain sections of the canal that are rewatered, and it's my understanding that it is man-made. That would be probably a better question for someone at the park. I'm not an interpreter, but the water source, that guess they're just watering it from parts of the Potomac.
Okay, next question is it illegal to pick rare threatened plants or dig up anything, growing?
Yes, yes. As far as the natural resources go, there are only certain things that can be harvested in the park. And that would be things like morels and pawpaws. So this time of year, you've heard me talk about the Pawpaw Tunnel. Pawpaw fruit are coming off the pawpaw trees this time of year. And so on the National Park Service website, there are regulations from the Code of Federal Regulations that stipulate what can be harvested in the park this time of year. And it tells you, how many gallons or whatever the regulations are on that this time of year. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's all very clearly spelled out on there.
There was a congressional act this year that funded the Park Service's unmet needs. Do you know how much of that went to the canal?
I don't off the top of my head, no. I'm sorry.
Okay. Question, what is the Pawpaw Tunnel? Can you talk about
the
that?
Pawpaw Tunnel, there's a section of the canal in Allegheny County where if they had gone along the Potomac, it's called actually the Pawpaw Bends, and it would have actually been more challenging to continue along those bends to create the canal along there. So they decided that they were actually going to go through the mountain in that section, but it took them much longer to do that. They had a lot of migrant workers who were working on that section of creating that tunnel. It took them much longer and a great deal more money than they had ever anticipated to create that Pawpaw Tunnel. And there are a lot of really wonderful wayside markers. If you ever go to that part of the canal and do the Pawpaw Hill Tunnel Trail, it will talk about the Irish and I believe it was German migrant camps and where their schools and where their church was and different parts of their camp up there and their story. But basically, it took, I forget the amount of money. I wish I could put my finger on how much money it took them. It was a ridiculous amount of money, and so much, even in materials to create that cut through the mountain. because of the challenging terrain to get through there. But it basically allowed them to bypass those pawpaw bends along that challenging section of the Potomac. So they call it kind of the main engineering marvel of the Cno Canal. And it's really the only tunnel along the Cno Canal. So it really is something spectacular to see. I would recommend taking a headlamp or a flashlight if you ever go visit that section, because once you get in one end, you really can't see to the other end. It's not quite a quarter, I forget how long it is, but it's been a while since I've been up there because they've been doing construction on it, but the construction, or in that vicinity, just on the opposite, the south portal, just outside of the south portal, they've been doing construction. And so I can't do my usual kind of hike on the Pawpaw Tunnel Hill Trail around there that I like to do. So I haven't been up that way lately because they've had some rock slides and they're taking the shale material out of there. But after this winter, that section should be reopened to the public. And it's a really great area to visit. So.
All right, well, I think on that note, we should probably wrap things up. You've given us an enormous amount of valuable, fascinating information, and I expect a lot of us are going to be spending more time in the park, having been reminded of what a fantastic resource this is. So I want to thank you for coming and talking to us and sharing all this information.
Well, thank you so much. And yes, just, like I said, with the rare plants, I mean, look down, you never know. I was out with my daughter early on in COVID, enjoying some sections of the park in spring of 2020, long before I worked for them. And, was photographing some of the photos that were in the slideshow today, not even knowing that they were rare, threatened, and endangered plants. And here, several years later, I find out that, oh, they were, I thought they were beautiful, which is why I photographed them. And with the white trout lily, I knew it was somewhat unusual because I had seen lots of yellow trout lily before, never white trout lily, but I didn't really truly know just how rare and how special it was. So I always say, take time to notice, don't be in a rush, just really take time to appreciate everything that surrounds you.
All right, well, I think with that, we'll stop recording and